your CCP exam, which you recently passed. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I think everyone would like to know your thoughts on your experience in the exam.
So these are my filtered thoughts based off the lengthy contract that I had to sign prior to taking the test that said that I wouldn't discuss A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, right? Look, so I am one of the people that has been through the addended RP training after 2.0 came out.
The original RP training and the new RP training, right?
And the Delta, yeah,
not the
advanced.
Not the advanced one, yeah.
Right.
But the original version of RP and the new and improved version of RP, which I believe we talked about in a previous episode.
Right, RP training 2.0. And so,
sure. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. And so, obviously, there are some distinct differences to what's contained in the trainings alone, right? Obviously, one has a test, one doesn't, but the training associated with the CCP way more in depth. There were areas that are similar, but there wasn't a complete breakdown of things like controls and assessment objectives. Like you went in, you knew they existed, but this was more in the CCP training conducted that I went through was conducted by Edwards, and Edwards essentially, the instructors went granular on the assessment objectives and gave like real-time scenarios for you to understand, if how to determine the adequacy and sufficiency of the evidence and how to prove certain controls and things of that nature. And so there was a lot of that, and then a lot of, and I'm not sure if this is included in the advanced training because I haven't taken it, and I don't think I will take it now that I have the CCP. So unless I just want it for giggles, right?
Sure, yeah.
But for the most part, it's way more in depth, and it covers a lot more of the assessment process.
Okay.
That's the best way to put it there. Like more real time scenarios associated with it
This
instead
is
of
CCP versus RP.
Correct. The CCP is more of a real. Like almost real scenario-esque training and perspective to it, right? Where with the RP training, you had a bunch of study materials and you went through those study materials and then you were testing the study materials. And the questions that were attached to it were more like about the content and not context.
More like a knowledge exam rather than like a situational sort of scenario-based exam.
Memorization and application, that's a good way to separate it.
How different is the CCP from the original version of RP, and how different is the CCP as of the time of this podcast, January 2023? How different is CCP from the first RP? How different is it from the second RP?
So from the first RP is light years, absolute light years, my guy. Like, they cover some of the same stuff, code of professional conduct and things that are, in that scenario. But again, in the RP training, it was the code of professional conduct says that blank, blank, blank is blank, blank, right? And with the CCP course, it was more like giving you scenarios to evaluate whether or not they were violations of the code of professional conduct.
I see.
Or giving you a scenario and giving you like options as to how to resolve that according to the COPC, which is the code of professional conduct. So it's more, like I said, more applied knowledge instead of memorization. And I think that's the best way to sum it up. And then when it gets to the Delta RP training, the Delta RP training was simply, everything that I mentioned about the original RP training, the memorization, and then more memorization into the aspects of the control framework, right? And the assessment objectives and control languages and breaking down each individual domain. So that was a good part of the RP. However, once again, if we're talking about thoroughness and depth and more applied knowledge, CCP is 100% light years ahead of it.
Yeah, and I think that I would agree based off of the RP materials that I've seen versus having gone through CCP and having taught CCP, much more in-depth, much more thorough. It's generally around the same material, but they are very, very different in terms of how much what the credentials represent, right? Because like you said, there's an exam that goes with CCP that you have to pass. And it just goes way more in depth than the RP does. However, the rule of thumb, though, is there's going to be a lot more RPs just by the nature of how they're set up. There's going to be a lot more RPs than there will be CCPs. So if people are going to use RP as some sort of a differentiator, which there's multiple things you could use, but if you're going to use RP as a differentiator, with people, I would always ask which version of the training they went through, because if they went through the original RP training and that's their claim to fame, definitely better to have gone through the updated RP training. Better still to have gone through the CCP training. And the big differentiator at all, really, in my opinion, is just how much time is spent analyzing the assessment objectives in the CMMC assessment guide, which are akin to the assessment objectives in 800-171A. All roads lead to the assessment objectives as the ultimate rule of thumb. And as it stands right now, the CCP training and exam represents sort of the best and most thorough treatment of somebody's knowledge of how to apply and understand those assessment objectives within the context of the CMMC assessment process overall.
65% of my CCP training, probably like 65% of the training that I went through for CCP covered things that I never touched in RP training.
Okay. I mean, I think it's a good, might be a place for people to start, but it's definitely interesting perspective for sure. I think that, when I took the CCP beta exam a couple months ago, the thing that just is very distinctive to me about it in comparison to other types of audit or GRC certifications or things like that is the same thing that differentiates NIST standards from most other standards, is that there are a set of assessment procedures that you have to go through in order to verify if the requirements are implemented. So the exam and the training focuses heavily on whether or not you understand those assessment criteria. And if you're hiring somebody to help you, their knowledge of that assessment criteria is really what's going to be the difference maker, because that's really what you're hiring them for, is to understand how those assessment criteria work. So
right.
It's definitely good perspective. I mean, as far as 2022 goes overall, I think that the existence of the CCP exams, the existence of the CCA exams, the beta exams, at this time last year, we didn't have any of that stuff. We didn't have the beta exams. We didn't have the real exams. And the difference between last January and this January in terms of the available training and the number of certified CCPs and so on and so forth, pretty much night and day.